Part 2, the worst natural disaster in the history of Canada, the 1998 ice storms. Hi guys, how's it going? My name is AussieTash. So we've watched part 1 together. Oh my gosh. The incredible footage, the devastation, the stories. I just couldn't believe that was real life. Discovery Montreal channel, thank you so much for creating this video and allowing me to share it with all my community. I'd like to thank all my subscribers for leaving comments and sharing your stories and tales with us. If you enjoyed part 1 and you're enjoying the channel, please jump on, hit that subscribe button. That would really help me out. Okay, let's get into part 2, the worst natural disaster in the history of Canada, the 1998 ice storms.
Go!
The signs of another bad day came early this morning. The skies rumbled with thunder and then opened up yet again with freezing rain, the 4th straight day.
Day 4, the worst day yet.
I'm gonna cry, I think. I'm very tired.
By late tonight, millions of Quebecers will be out of power.
Power is still coming in, but we do not have any backup anymore, so we are in a fragile situation at this moment.
More fragile than we knew. A few days later, the Premier would admit we came close to disaster that Friday. 5 lines supply power to Montreal. Only one was still working.
While Hydro-Quebec desperately tried to calm fears at this press conference, the power went out. The reality is, by the end of the day, 3 million Quebecers were still in the dark.
Okay, so day 4 in, that's it. The ship sunk. The power's gone. Montreal's in darkness. Oh my gosh. And there's no point of Hydro-Quebec, is it? I'm guessing that's the people that provide the electricity, saying it's going to be all right, everything's going to be good, because they know it's not. They know the ship is sunk. Please just try and be safe, get to a shelter, and ride it out together. Pretty hard to say when you've just lost everything, but isn't it? You've lost your house, you've lost your livelihood, and you just really have no idea what you're going to do or how you're going to start your life again. It's pretty rough, isn't it? Mother Nature can be very, very rough and very, very mean.
The Rougemont area is an icy wasteland. The ice is relentless. It covers everything, including the many high-voltage lines that have fallen around here.
The city of Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu is trapped in ice, powerless for 4 days now, damage everywhere.
This town is at the heart of the Triangle of Darkness, a region southeast of Montreal where there is virtually no power and no hope of getting any soon. The buildup of ice here is staggering.
It's hard to imagine just how much ice they got here around Rougemont. Take a look at this bush. Look at the thickness of ice compared to my hand.
Getting any supplies to the South Shore was difficult. Late in the afternoon, the bridges closed. Ice was falling from the superstructures.
People found out the hard way that Montreal's subway trains run on electricity.
For the first time in 30 years, all the metro lines stopped working.
In neighborhood after neighborhood, there is simply no electricity, forcing many residents here to evacuate until power can be restored.
Utility companies say it could take weeks before repairs are made. Nearly 1 million homes and 3 million people are now without electricity. The military has been called out to help. The storm is expected to move out to sea tonight, but forecasters say it will be followed by a major snowstorm.
That's all ice. The whole thing, that ice was thicker than that man's hands. I've never seen anything like that before. And what, it's only going to get worse? After the ice storms, there's going to be the ice rain, did they say? Oh my gosh. It really just lets us know how vulnerable we can be to Mother Nature, doesn't it? Just crazy. Everyone by now would just be exhausted. People would feel helpless. Emergency workers, they probably haven't slept in 4 days. You'd just be shutting down, wouldn't you? Emotionally, physically, you'd be shutting down. You'd feel absolutely hopeless and just, it would be physically, mentally exhausting and devastating.
Bill Rediker, ABC News, Montreal.
With this severe of an ice storm, the coating of ice that disabled much of the man-made infrastructure also takes a huge toll on nature. A single 50-foot conifer will accumulate as much as 45 tons of ice during a prolonged period of freezing rain. Many trees won't survive this extra weight.
As ice starts to glaze on trees and power lines, it doesn't look like it weighs that much. Don't be fooled, it does. Get this, 1 inch of ice thickness per 1 foot weighs 7 pounds.
Not only were they down, they looked like they'd been just exploded.
When they hit the ground, they would shatter.
I heard a crack, and right as I looked up, that part of the tree was coming down at me, so I dove out of the way. I never screamed so loud in my life.
Desolation all over the city. The trees, ecological disaster for Montreal.
By the end of day 4, Montreal is weary. The sheer weight of the ice from this storm is crushing the remaining cables and utility poles.
Forecasters are saying the end may be in sight, but clearly it's been getting worse before it gets better.
All those pictures. This is real life. This is really happening. Cars just crushed by trees. Houses, homes crushed by trees. All those trees dying. The wildlife. They wouldn't have survived this. They're gone. Everyone's livelihood just devastated. Gone. They're going to take years to recover. What do they do now? How do they rebuild? Mother Nature again. She's cruel, isn't she?
Much of eastern Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes are affected, but nowhere is it bleaker tonight than right here in Montreal.
One of the worst places to be in Canada today was downtown Montreal. Till now, it had been almost untouched by the catastrophic blackouts, but tonight, it too was hit.
This is the view from Montreal's Lookout, a city in the depth of darkness, after the most difficult day of this crisis so far.
I figured it's a total blackout because if downtown has no light, there's probably none at all in my area.
1.3 million customers of hydro. That means there are more than 3 million Quebecers who still tonight have no power. These 4 days have been a constant battle against the force of nature, and where it could be weeks before power is restored.
Hold on. The entire city of Montreal has no power. The only lights we're seeing are the cars that are driving along the road. Oh my gosh. What do they say? Over 3 million people had no power? No power at all. Where do they go? Even the shelters. The shelters are running on generators, but they can't run forever, can they? Where are all these people going?
Tonight, Montreal is a city marked by great swaths of darkness, with the odd island of light.
Tom, it has been an incredible evening here on the island of Montreal. With each passing hour, more bad news coming. What's the latest?
Well, the big development on the island of Montreal is that one of the 2 plants that supply water to the millions of people who live here, one of those 2 plants is down. It is not functioning.
One of 2 main water treatment facilities servicing 15 municipalities has gone down.
So on top of all of the misery, the blackout, the cold houses, no heat, and this has been going on for 4 days, on top of that, there's a large chunk of the population of Montreal tonight that does not even have water. The situation in this city tonight is really, truly desperate.
So now, no power, no heat, and now no water. And you know what? You just have to tell it as it is, don't you? If there's no hope, if everything's going pear-shaped, as we call it in Australia, if it's a gong show, you just have to say it as it is, don't you? Scary, unbelievable, but it's true. It happened, and I just can't believe what I'm watching.
So if there's any good news at this moment, it's what's falling in front of you there. It's snow, and that means it's not freezing rain, but it also means it's getting colder, and that brings with it its own dangers. Tom Kennedy reporting to us tonight from the streets of Montreal. The people of Montreal have been taking everything this storm could throw at them, and they have persevered.
Well, I think Montrealers, I think they're hardy by nature, and I think that basically they're going to cope with this, and they've coped with other things.
At the Westin Hotel on the dark side of Sherbrooke Street, hotel employees guided guests to their rooms and the hotel's restaurant, where a cold buffet and some hot music kept up their spirits.
They
basically we want to keep people busy, change their mind because everyone is fairly stressed.
In the shelter I visited today, I found people in remarkably good spirits, remarkably grateful to and patient with the people who are helping them.
Things are bound to get better because right now many are saying they just can't get much worse.
The community spirit, it can lift us, can't it? How nice was it, the music playing just to try and hype people up when they're feeling at the absolute lowest point. Beautiful, beautiful to see. I love it.
Then we lost power for more than half of the province.
The ice formed by freezing rain is the toughest ice on Earth.
The main reason for that is there's very few air bubbles in the water droplet.
The storm has now laid down a solid pack of ice of over 4 inches deep, thicker than a sidewalk slab and just as strong. Once the ice layers reach over 4 inches deep, their sheer weight threatens every major structure. And there is nothing more important to a city in crisis than the giant steel transmission towers that bring its power. The freezing rain has spread over an area of 70,000 square miles, taking out towers across the entire region. Montreal sits on an island connected to the outside world by bridges and tunnels. It receives its power by highly vulnerable power lines. The city relies almost exclusively on hydroelectric power, generated far to the north in James Bay and Labrador. This creates a logistics problem. It takes over $15 billion worth of transmission lines, almost enough to reach once around the world, to feed electricity to the power-hungry South. Ultimately, 8 main high-voltage transmission lines bring over 20 gigawatts of power to the city. Right now, any power to Montreal will rely on these delicate arteries that are covered in ice. One by one, 6 of the 8 power lines that feed Montreal have collapsed. The last line into the north of the city is groaning under the extreme weight of ice, and one ice-laden line hangs on to the east. Each cable is now carrying weight over 10 times its design load, the equivalent to a person hanging on every 10 feet. Montreal's only remaining lifelines are at the breaking point. Now the giant towers that have held out against the ice face their final test.
At the end of the day, on last Thursday, we really thought that we might leave Montreal, that we might have a total blackout in the Montreal area. It was something like a disaster. Only one line. The line was watched by all people the whole night.
In a last desperate bid to save the only power line left, the energy companies literally take matters into their own hands, smashing it off by hand.
A delicate operation to de-ice the line. The strategy? A crew hovering in an armed forces helicopter, dropping logs on the line to knock the ice off.
That is madness. Absolute desperation, isn't it? They are literally putting their lives on the line, flying in darkness, trying to save that one last power pole to keep the electricity flowing. Those chopper pilots, the people that were throwing the logs on top of the ice to break it, wow. Emergency service people are just courageous, aren't they? Absolutely courageous. Humanitarians, putting their lives on the line every day, no matter what. In situations like this, oh my gosh.
Unconventional, unprecedented, but it worked.
As the sun rises, Montreal breathes a collective sigh of relief. The remaining power lines were saved, and much-needed power slowly returns to the city.
Don, can you give us the good news we've been waiting for?
Deborah, there is good news tonight. Dear friends at home, we can tell you we can now bring closure to the worst ice storm on record. The changeover has taken place. We've got light flurries falling in the greater Montreal area. As for ice, forget it.
After the big freeze, the big thaw. Ahead, the long process of recovery and cleaning up.
Okay, so we're at day 5. They saved that last power line. That was real footage. I can't believe it. Wow, that is super cool. Day 5, it's all over. It's going to thaw. That's going to be scary too, because that's going to create a lot of water. Everything's going to be slippery. It's still very dangerous conditions, isn't it?
This window of decent weather may be very small. It's supposed to get colder and colder over the next few days. So you can imagine what went on here today, a huge effort to make the most of this opportunity, to get ice off bridges, to clear debris off the streets, most of all to restore power to the city of Montreal.
This was an uneasy calm after the storm. Downtown Montreal, much of it still without power, was turned into a massive pedestrian mall. Dozens of streets were closed, too dangerous to pass. Ice, huge chunks of it, continued to rain down from above. Despite the break in the weather, life has not returned to normal, far from it. Montrealers were told not to drink the tap water. That prompted a rush on bottled water. This store was cleaned out. Even one of the proudest symbols of the city, hockey's Montreal Canadiens, couldn't escape the effects of the storm. Their game against New York tonight was postponed.
On the first day of relief from the onslaught of ice pellets, there was still shell shock from the ravages of the ice war.
This looks like worse than any hurricane I've ever seen. I mean, the West Island, I thought where we are was pretty bad, but this is incredible. This is devastation.
I was in Winnipeg yesterday. It's the first time in my life I wish I stayed in Winnipeg.
People start to venture out, inspecting the damage and telling stories of another harrowing night.
I can't believe it. This is the first time I've seen it. It's really sad. I feel bad for a lot of these people.
You know, it's like a war zone, you know? It's just, I can't get over how bad it was.
And as the power crews begin to get back up, they also begin to get almost unbelievable estimates about outages. Nearly 200,000 customers out in Vermont and northern New York. More than 500,000 people.
NYMO says, get this, 99% of its customers are without power.
That's in the northern part of New York. That's unbelievable.
I've never seen an ice storm of this nature. You go through even the main streets, forget about the back streets, and you see the trees and the power lines down, and you just realize that this is something that's going to take quite some time to get over.
In Kingston, close to 75% of the area remains in the dark. That's because Ontario's Hydro's 2 main lines are down.
Mid-morning, an unprecedented step.
I am declaring, as of 10 a.m. this morning, a state of emergency in Ottawa-Carleton.
The scope of this disaster is hard to take in, especially in the area that took the biggest hit, Montreal's South Shore. No one has escaped. Nearly every household, every business is blacked out in a string of cities and towns that have become known as the Triangle of Darkness.
Wow, the rebuilding period. Please leave a comment. If you were affected, what was your experience like? What did you have to do? How did you rebuild? Just devastating, isn't it? Absolutely devastating. I've never seen anything like this before. This is real life footage. This is Mother Nature at her worst, isn't it? We are vulnerable. We are 100% vulnerable to her, and there is nothing we can do.
You can see what happened right here. Even small wires became like thick, heavy cables of ice. In some of the areas around here, which is just south of Montreal, the whole distribution system has collapsed, and it could take weeks to get it back to normal.
We met up with this convoy of linemen who drove to the South Shore all the way from Long Island, New York. They worked for a Connecticut-based power utility, and to our surprise, most were of French-Canadian heritage.
I'm originally stands at Quebec.
And what's your name, sir?
Remy Perrault.
Another Francophone.
Yeah, we're working down New York right now, but we came up here to help everybody.
CTV's Genevieve Bushman and her camera operator were reporting on the storm on the outskirts of Montreal in an area that is particularly hard hit. A hydro tower came crumbling to the ground, buckling under the staggering weight of the ice. The tower brought with it power lines attached to the massive steel structure. The CTV crew was trapped, wires surrounding them on all sides. And you were trapped there for how long?
Well, we were trapped there for several hours, actually. There was these massive high-tension wires around us, so we didn't know whether we could move at all.
As we've heard, people are dying and collapsing from use of barbecues, propane, and other heaters inside their powerless homes. And they're ignoring warnings about touching wires or cutting trees down. With the power out, It's more a question of not hearing the warning in the first place.
People are freezing. They're doing whatever they can to stay warm. And he was right. If there's no power, how can they hear the warnings not to start fires, not to use your barbecues, not to burn wood? Not everyone's got a radio these days with batteries. We all rely on our mobile phones and TVs and stuff, don't we? It just lets us know that no matter how far advanced we are with our technologies, Mother Nature can come along and like that, just take it all away.
35 people died in this disaster and 500,000 people were forced from their homes. In the end, it left $5 billion in damage. Oh.
Hi, I'm home. I have power.
Oh, I feel really great to be home.
Finally, progress. Emerging from darkness, the lights are coming back on.
After what was quite literally the darkest weekend in Montreal's modern history, at last there was light. By daybreak, power was back in the downtown core. Regular business was not.
Downtown officials say the roof of the Eaton Center is in danger of collapsing under pressure from thick ice in Montreal. There had been an earlier report that the roof had collapsed and 100 people taking shelter in the complex had to evacuate.
Electric utility workers from across North America, the Army, and just about anyone who could lend a hand was trying to get the lights back on and clean up the mess.
The community spirit when stuff like this happens is incredible, isn't it? Going back, did they say 35 lives had been lost? Gosh. That gets your heartstrings too, doesn't it? Real life footage like this, I have never seen this before. It's hard to believe that it's real. It's incredible to look at, but sad at the same time.
One of the first things to do was to get rid of the tons of ice. There were some unique ways of doing it, like the team of police sharpshooters getting the ice off a communications antenna. In Montreal, most people will have electricity in a day or two. Here on the South Shore, hundreds of thousands of people will stay in the dark for 2 more weeks.
This crew is one of about 10 working in the area of Saint-Hyacinthe, a city with no power for a week. The men are working from 12 to 18 hours a day. The pylons are taking shape quickly. Cable lies waiting to be strung, but it takes time. The lines here will not be up, the foreman says, before next week.
And as temperatures plunged to -20, a major operation was underway to convince people without power to leave their homes.
After about a week or so, 8 days, I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore because it was way too cold. I realized when I stepped out of the apartment, it was an old 4-story building built in the 20s. The hallway was totally dark. I realized that everybody was out of the building. I was the last one to leave.
So 8 days in, people still don't have power. They're saying another 2 weeks at least. They're doing the best they can. I can't believe it. Some people were still living in their homes 8 days in. Shows a lot of courage, doesn't it? I guess they just didn't want to leave. I'm just also going back to the shelters and thinking, 8 days in, still all those people in those shelters, still no power. What are they doing? Do they just stay there until they're told they can go home? I can't imagine that. I really can't. It's scary, isn't it? It really is scary.
As night falls, the temperature drops. Wind chills tonight will hit -30, the coldest since this crisis began more than a week ago. Firewood and other supplies are pouring in from other parts of Quebec, Canada, and the United States.
We're coming out of Richmond, Virginia, and we're bringing the beds and the tents for the people to sleep in. My dispatcher called me and said, well, we got an emergency. We got people up there in Canada that's sleeping outside in these beds. And I told him, I said, well, I'll be in.
This storm is more than just freezing rain and downed power lines. It's also people coming together to help. Neighbors helping neighbors. People volunteering for countless hours in shelters. And the kindness of strangers.
The guy that came around the corner and hooked me back up to the electricity came in a truck that had a Massachusetts license plate on it.
Oh, yeah.
And this kid looked like Adonis, the Greek god of electricity hooking up, you know? I was never happier in my life.
and more signs things were getting back to normal. Schools started reopening.
Did you enjoy your extended Christmas holiday? Yeah. You did? Yeah. You enjoyed being home without power? Yeah.
And everyone had a special story to tell about his or her extra long vacation.
I had an oven stove.
You have an oven stove?
Yeah,
What's an oven stove?
I mean a wood stove.
A wood stove.
In the fridge, some of our things went bad, but we're still okay, and my mom now is like going in for groceries today.
Just think of how devastating it would be for the children during that time. They'd have a lot of stories to tell, wouldn't they? So it's nearly 25 years since this happened. These children, they'd be still thinking about it, reflecting on it, and telling their stories, wouldn't they? Just, wow.
You wonder exactly how we survived that devastating ice storm of '98? Just look to your neighbors.
Everybody was in it together. You were without power, so were 20,000 other people right around us, and didn't have it any worse than anybody else. But you helped your neighbor, and your neighbor helped you.
Adversity, somehow, has brought out the best in people.
I think it's everybody's working together and enjoying it.
It's made people far more human and realize that what we can do for each other.
A little laugh therapy to lighten things up.
Considering the time that we're all facing right now, it's been very stressful for our family and for a lot of people around here, so it's definitely very uplifting.
Show you that people care, you know? They really do care.
I've actually been helping out today, so it's given me something to do.
Now, could I judge by your accent that you may never have seen anything like this before?
No, we're from England, so we've only been here a year, so we're still coping with the Canadian weather, let alone this. So.
Well, you'll only see this once in a lifetime, they say,
yes,
such as this.
Yes.
What were some of the lessons learned from this? You mentioned generators. I think a lot more people
prepared.
and farms have generators now.
Well, there are probably lessons learned, but it's going to be so long before something like this happens again. We'll probably have to learn all over again.
Mother Nature reminded us that she can still wreak havoc with our high-tech modern way of life with almost no warning in a way we almost never expected. We also learned that here in Quebec, more people heat with electricity than in just about any other part of the world. But what we should really remember is how much we depended on our friends and our neighbors, on strangers from nearby and from far away.
You know, from a meteorologist's point of view, this was certainly the most interesting thing I've ever seen. I mean, it was mind-boggling what was going on.
As far as I'm concerned, it's definitely the biggest weather-related thing I've ever covered in my life.
And no doubt, most of us who lived through it will never forget the ice storm of '98.
1997 was said to be the warmest year on record. In fact, since records were kept at all.
A lot of folks think that the ice storm in '98 was a once-in-a-lifetime event, but the reality is it will happen again.
Milder winters may mean the conditions to create the perfect ice storm could be just around the corner.
The worst national disaster in Canadian history. The ice storms of 1998. Mother Nature, she can be cruel, can't she? I can't believe that was real life. It's just blown my mind. 25 years on, please leave a comment. Let me know how are things going for you if you were involved. How did it affect your life? How long did it take to rebuild your homes, your businesses? I'd love to hear all your stories. Like I said during the video, no matter how much technology and stuff we have, doesn't matter. Sometimes Mother Nature can just come in and switch it all off. The one thing that we always have going for us is the community spirit, isn't it? And as long as we've got that and we keep that going, that always gives us hope. That was it for that video. I really thank all my subscribers for recommending that. I really enjoyed learning about it, as devastating as it was. If you liked the video, please smash that like button, leave a comment, and remember to subscribe. That would really help me out. Cheers from down under. Take care. Bye.